Hello everyone, welcome to the Nullcon Webinar series. I hope everyone is doing well. My name is Sakshi and I am part of the Nullcon team. So let me briefly introduce Nullcon. The Nullcon conference is a unique platform for security companies and evangelists to showcase their research technology to the community. We have been running Nullcon security conferences since 2010, where information security is discussed in detail among the industry, government, and tech community. So in this work from home environment, we keep continuing to share knowledge and connect with our global community by running multiple online events like webinars, workshops, trainings, and resume clinics. So in this upcoming time, we are going to have some exciting sessions on red, purple, and blue team activity using Azure and many more. Also happy to let you know that we have announced our Nullcon security trainings in the online edition, which will happen from 23rd September to 26th September. And more details about the same will be put out in the chat box. And coming to our guest speaker, today we have with us Sid Rao, and he is going to share with us his thoughts on Bhadra Framework, threat modeling for mobile communication system. Sid Rao is a security and privacy researcher at Nokia Bell Labs and Aalto University, Finland. He is a system security researcher who specializes in the security analysis of communication protocols, architects, and recently usability and human factors of security. He has previously given talks at security conferences such as DEF CON, Black Hat, Hack.lu, and Troopers. I would like to welcome Sid on behalf of all of us. And lastly, before we go ahead, a few instructions for the audience. Our talk duration is about 30 minutes, and after that, we will have a question answer session. So you all can ask your questions using the chat option after the talk. And I request you all to keep your mic on mute during the session so there is no disturbance. And without any further delay, I request Sid to take charge of the session.
Thanks a lot, Sakshi. Thank you so much, Sakshi, and the entire team of Nullcon Webinar series for having me here. Let me share my screen first. All right. So today I'll be talking about one of my pet projects, which I named it as Bhadra Framework, and this is basically an attack and threat modeling framework for telcos. And as Sakshi was mentioning, can you guys? All right, so as Sakshi was mentioning, I do mainly research in the system security area, which means that I actually look into different systems and kind of build hands-on attacks, novel attacks to kind of break them or try to see what are the security vulnerabilities. And telecom networks, I have tinkered with password managers, browser extension, cryptocurrency wallets, VPNs, some of the cloud applications. And coming from research background, I also got recently interested in human aspects of security, like why do developers make mistakes, or how to build secure products from a human point of view, meaning that how can we support the developers to come up with more secure code and things like this. And recently, one of my gigs have also been on threat modeling. And the reason why I'm actually reiterating over my previous experience is because, as you can see, that it's a wide array of systems, and one of the things what I clearly differentiate is actually telecom networks are totally different from the enterprise networks. Like you can put VPNs or cloud applications, all these things in the enterprise networks, and they're kind of different from the telco network. And always, since I'm jiggling between both these worlds, I try to see what are the good aspects of both worlds and try to balance in my work and try to incorporate them in one or the other way. And one of the problems what I see in telco networks is it's quite complicated. And in this slide, I'm probably I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the telco network, but this is just an overview of oversimplified version of how telco networks work. And usually on one end, we have the mobile users, most of us who have a mobile phone. And what we usually do is we connect to the cell towers, and which we call it as radio access network. So there are 2G and 3G towers, which is bundled together to kind of work in a same set of radio frequency or things like this. And there are 4G towers, which is again like a little bit of same thing, but it works a little bit better. And together we call it as radio access networks. And this is the cell tower to which our mobile phones connect over radio signals. And once that is done, there is something called as core network. This is where all the operators from Geo or Airtel or all these people have their servers, and that is actually connected. And in most cases, they are connected over wide channel, whereas the radio access is actually over wireless channels. And this is mostly core network is connected between either like country specific or internationally. Either they are connected within the network. It can be like inter-operator or intra-operator as well. And once this core network, actually like the main functionality of core network is that it provides the basic functionalities of any telephony system, such as making phone calls and SMS. However, there are other services which are needed. Like it could be your voice services, value-added services, or any internet services. Those are all things come as part of a separate component, which we call it as a service and application network. And again, there are public internet, because we definitely have to access internet. And similar, like what I have been explaining so far, like the radio access network, core network, and the mobile users are one part of the system, or specific to one operator. You can also imagine similar set of system for other operators, and these operators obviously have to be connected to make business. And all these things are somehow connected to operations and maintenance and support systems mainly. Although no matter how much we say that everything is not connected, one is wireless, one is wired, I'm sure that they'll be like connected over some operation and maintenance system, and people are working to support it 24/7. So here there are like actually two logical planes. So one is the control plane, which is actually to run your operator always have to know where exactly or which mobile tower you are connected to. And these kind of things can be uh, seen as part of the control plane, and hence they are connected specifically to know the whereabouts and some core functionalities of the telephony networks. And there is also this all the other aspects, which is not necessarily control, but your user data, your phone call, your data goes, that is the user plane. And having said this, everything is in kind of different technology, because one, as I told, one is on the wireless, which uses radio frequencies, radio communication. Other is basically running some Linux servers, or they are connected and they are actually running some database, or like a lot of different technical stack is running over each one of them. The problem is with this kind of setup is there are different kind of attackers. So we can call it as threats. One is like, the mobile users can be evil. Like all of us want to have free phone calls or send free SMS or, free data. Who doesn't want it? So we all would probably have a potential to kind of, and especially like, since I'm addressing the hackers community, I'm sure that most of us want to tinker with our phones and try to do something fun stuff, but that is still considered as a telco threat. And then we might have heard of the radio link attackers, and it's popularly known as the IMSI catchers. And basically, like between your phone and the radio tower, there will be like man in the middle, and they use something called as IMSI catchers, and then these kind of attackers also pose some threats. And in the core network, we will have like core network is very specific to operators, and we have seen a rise in uh, operators, mobile operators from oppressive countries, and like they're trying to indulge in a cyber war and things like this. And that is there, and definitely, like I said, since these are connected to the IP network, like the internet can also bring a lot of threats. Finally, like human insiders, like irrespective of how amazing, how secure the external things are, there is always a there's always like the weakest link in the security is always the humans, as they say, and I'm sure that there will be some threats from there as well. And finally, there are plenty of attacks that could happen on the supply chain. Like although we are like we can secure everything, but we wouldn't be able to get into the details of chip level security in some cases, and especially when you're running a very large scale infrastructure, it's quite tricky, and those kind of supply chain attacks are also there. The problem with this kind of complicated infrastructure and the different types of threat is that it's very difficult for threat intelligence sharing, and mainly because in the telco field there are no telco specific threat models. Like what people usually do is they usually try to use well-known frameworks such as Stride or Pasta, but the problem is it's quite tricky. They're not so useful. And there is there are standard bodies such as GSMA or 3GPP who actually make this standards for telco networks, and they are not suitable for telco threat modeling. And unfortunately, most of the talk in security within telco happens using data flow diagrams, or it's basically telling like two entities how they talk to each other using some kind of protocol diagrams. And they're amazing to if you really want to get into the modularity and know what exactly is happening. But unfortunately, you cannot do pretty much anything else with it. And so when we were trying to we started this project by looking into different threat modeling frameworks, and we were trying to see if we can adopt it to our use case. Unfortunately, none of them did, but one of the closest contestant was MITRE ATT&CK, and that's where we wanted to see whether we can use MITRE ATT&CK. For those of you don't know what is MITRE ATT&CK, MITRE ATT&CK is a framework which provides a taxonomy of tactics and techniques and also procedures of different adversarial behavior. But our bad luck that MITRE ATT&CK framework is actually specific to enterprise systems, meaning that they have something called as pre-attack, which is actually pre-exploit phase. And then there is specific taxonomy for OS specific or platform specific things like, if there is a bug, if there is a malware on Windows or Mac OS, definitely you can use attack. And there is also for cloud and network, but unfortunately not for mobile. And we also saw that, they are trying to build something for mobile. When we heard the word mobile, we thought that maybe there is something in for us. Unfortunately, it again turns out to be a specific to Android bugs and things like this. And they also recently had something specific for industrial control system. So what we thought was, instead of since we were trying to use MITRE ATT&CK for some of our use cases and trying to build something, we couldn't, because eventually it became completely entire thing. And we also saw that why don't we actually build something specific in the same style of MITRE ATT&CK, but very specific to telco, because we cannot use MITRE anyhow, but an attack-like framework would be very useful in our case. So we call it Bhadra. Bhadra, most of you guys, since you guys are from the Indian subcontinent, can correlate. And that's exactly the meaning happens to be securing, or the goddess of hunting, and something like this. And it also happens to be a river which flows in my hometown, and I couldn't think of a better name for that. And the reason why I tried to call Bhadra as an ecosystem, because it has different components, and we want it to be a standalone project that supports any sort of threat modeling activities in telco. Having said this, Bhadra in a nutshell is nothing but it's a structured way to talk about security in telco, and it provides a common language and a reference framework to describing adversary behaviors in terms of the adversarial tactics, techniques, and procedures. And unfortunately, what it is not yet, I say that yet because it's in our pipeline, but we would soon be there. And it's unfortunately not an attack playbook. It's not an automated playbook. Although we have gathered a lot of attacks and how it works and build the knowledge of it, but we haven't automated it, and we want to be very careful in this aspects. And it's definitely not a MITRE ATT&CK family of tool. And again, every time I say framework, people try to associate with some sort of AI and ML magic, which does everything for you. Unfortunately, it is not. So, like I said, it's a framework. It's a conceptual framework, which is a common language or taxonomy. And we believe that any language, just like the languages we speak, this is also a language for security in telco, and this has to be community driven, meaning that more people start using it, more people try to accept this as a language, then it is good for everyone. The advantage of such language is that it's quite useful within detection and investigation for security operation teams and incident response team, because it brings everyone in same jargons and same structure for them to speak about certain incidents. And also it's useful in planning and executing, especially in red teaming and pen testing. And mainly as a proceed, you would probably know that it would be helpful in mapping the defense. Again, one thing which is clearly missing in the telco field is that there are quite a lot of attacks happening on telco system, but unfortunately, there is no way to attribute to specific groups or specific APTs. So there is no concept of APTs yet specific to telco, and we believe that a framework like Bhadra can bring something to this field. And like I said, eventually we want to be able to, like, now we have a catalog of all the attacks. Eventually the next step obviously is to kind of simulate them in a playground to know like how strong an operator's defense mechanism is, how strong an operator can actually defend certain type of attacks and things like this. And this is where we also think that it can again be used for not necessarily within a company. It can also be used for exchanging about threat intel. And we, although like we want everything to be like spoken in public and kind of openly debated, we very well know that this would eventually going to be like every operator or company specific. Nevertheless, in this presentation, what I'm trying to present is actually uh, like flavors of all the things, like the framework and certain tools and how it can be used and things like this. So Bhadra has three components. One of them is the framework, which is the taxonomy, and then there is the infrastructure. Like I said, it is built in such a way that it should be used by the community. So what we did was we thought like let's make it as a quick hack, like quick app or a web tool which everyone can use. So we built an infrastructure which you can carry anywhere you go. And the whole point of Bhadra has been that we want it to be mission feedable, meaning that it should be able to integrate with an existing processes, existing systems. So it made sense for us to kind of build the infrastructure and not just theoretically, like although we were tempted to just say that theoretically this is just a box of taxonomy, we wanted to do everything else. And also being in human factors of security field also helped us, like how do you build UIs that makes like secure decisions. And whether like first when we started Bhadra, we didn't even know whether like is threat modeling a commonplace in telco world, because coming from enterprise security and other field in telco, nobody was not talking about threat modeling. And I was kind of taken aback when I came up with this framework, and I didn't know whether people would be able to use it. So we started understanding people's mentality towards like what happens if we tell them to do threat modeling on a daily basis and things like this. So we built several studies to understand it. So the framework part looks something like this, and you can always read this full paper, which is quite boring. And unless you're not interested, I would just my suggestion is to just stick to the slides. But nevertheless, it's a 25-page paper. So what we done is we gathered public resources, mainly because we wanted to catalog all the attacks. So we probably went through 500-ish attacks, and all of them are public, because one advantage is that all these public attacks are like there's no company secret, so we can actually give it to others and tell that, hey, you know what, this attack, and we can do this, blah blah blah. Similarly, we tried to understand each and every attack flow and try to come up with commonality so that we can group them together as tactics or techniques. And also we cross-reference with existing solutions. It could be products, it could be standardized solutions as part of like, there is some 2G vulnerabilities in the 2G system may not be a vulnerability in 3G. So we try to, cross-reference them, and also finally came up with a tactic and techniques matrix. So what we currently have is up to 4G. The reason is because we wanted this work to have a practical impact, meaning that 5G system, although there are plenty of proof of concept systems running, we just wanted to stick just only till 4G, because that's predominantly everywhere in the world. And we have two versions. So first version has 47 techniques and 8 tactics. And we realized that we still need more techniques to cover anything given on the telco. Like from one end to other, we want to be able to model everything. And that's why we came up in the second round, we came up with 52 techniques and 9 techniques. So this is how the taxonomy looks like. Those who are familiar with uh, MITRE ATT&CK probably knows that it looks very similar. Like, for example, there is reconnaissance, initial access, persistence, and things like this. But all the techniques are very specific to telco. Like we try to, like, attackers' motive or the tactic, which is the first line, is always kind of similar. But we also have uh, quite a lot of delta in this. And given any attack, we see 3 different aspects. So first one is obviously the attack mounting, where you have this reconnaissance, initial access, persistence, and recovery. That is where an attacker is trying to, approach the target and trying to prepare for their attack. And here you see that in the initial access, you can see access from UE, SIM, radio, partner, mobile network. So basically, it covers the entire attack surface. Like any attack, any given entry point we have covered, and we try to, like, the attacker try to propagate from there. And the second aspect obviously is the attack execution. Attack execution is where actually the attacker executes his payload, and it has like things like, he has already compromised the target, and what else he wants to do. Mainly he want to see what else are available there through lateral movement, or misuse some existing things, or try to evade the defense. And here you can and finally he collects something or leaves an impact. Here probably it could be location tracking, eavesdropping the calls and intercepting data and SMS, or making a billing fraud, DDoS, and things like this. And like I've been mentioning, this is not we although we want it to be standalone, we are very much aware that MITRE ATT&CK has its own advantages. And specifically, like, imagine that if you ask me, like, everything in the end is just basically Linux servers and running some databases. So I'm sure that all these enterprise systems are somehow part of the telco. It's just that they are hiding behind a very complicated structure. So we wanted to complement attack. Like, we don't want to reiterate what MITRE is already doing. So we wanted to complement it. So this is the place where we actually link it to MITRE. And this is where, like, imagine that there is a specific platform, a service specific, like database vulnerability, malwares. This is where you link it. And it gives you this nice, modeling approach where one aspect is actually covering the telco network and network specific aspects, and then it takes you to the platform specific aspect. And secondly, like I've been mentioning about the delta, although, like, if you go through all the techniques, they're different, but one specific tactical category of standard misuse is very different. Here you might have heard of SS7 based attacks and GTP and all this kind of things, which are core network protocols, and they were built in a era where there were no mobile phones. They're built for landlines, but unfortunately 40 years later, without much security, they're still used in the current telco networks. And these kind of things are actually misusing. If you ask what is the attack there, it's just knowing the complicated protocols and misusing for a bad purpose. And these kind of things, we decided that, kind of highlighting this because it's very specific to telco and nowhere to be seen. And having said this, I would like to move to the second component of Bhadra, that is the infrastructure. So what we covered in the taxonomy or the matrix, what you see in the previous slide, is just the things about what techniques they're used. But unfortunately, if I give, even if people know each and everything, unfortunately, what UE knocking, let's say, for example, or what is pre-AKA technique, random thing, but pre-AKA technique doesn't mean anything. So we wanted to have everything behind it, because this is covering anyhow tactics and techniques, but it's definitely missing all the procedures. So what we decided was, why not build an knowledge base? And most importantly, we wanted to build in such a way that it can be fed to machine, meaning that if somebody is modeling in a security operation team and somebody is in a other team, we want to be able to, all of them to bring it to the same platform, and they could see what is happening. And also all of these can be should be to support tooling, it has to be a part of the API. So in this knowledge base, we give examples, prior definitions, and things like this. And in the API, it basically supports tooling. Mainly those of you know a little bit about the telco security area, there are this knowledge base probably is not, I wouldn't claim it as my novel contribution, because most of the things could be there. Like, I'm not sure, I'm just saying could be as part of some guidelines or recommendation or some sort of security standards, or it could be part of NIST or any of this white papers. But unfortunately, it is knowing how complicated and how big these can be, like every standards being like hundreds of pages, and every there are like thousands of them. It's a big task. So what we want to do is keep it in a very compact format, which looks something like this. And when I say compact format, basically knowledge base should have a description which explains like what is the origin, what is the history, and some sort of things. And then since it has to be mission accessible, it would be nice to have a metadata and ID and some examples of technique usage, if we can link it to any CVEs or APT. And mind you, Telco doesn't have its own CVE or APT, and I clearly see that a framework like Bhadra can actually initiate such sort of efforts. Because if you ask me what specifically are the vulnerabilities to cell towers, probably I would fumble because I wouldn't know. So this is one approach, like by kind of starting this structure, giving the structure to the telco operators in the community, we think that it could be of use. And again, like quantifying has its own advantages and disadvantages, but I would assume that this is where we want to kind of focus only on the advantages. Any technique for that matter, let's say carrier billing fraud, which is shown in the example, would mean nothing even for people in security, unless and until it shows, or it at least in the initial days, it has to somehow convey that how risky is it, what is the severity of it, or what is the impact that is going to cause. And now that we are collecting and kind of analyzing different type of attacks and threats, we thought like maybe like coming up with a score, and this potentially can be used for some sort of CVSS scoring. And again, this kind of structure, knowledge-based structure, can also have mitigation and detection and some references. And all this are kind of, anywhere you use Bhadra, this comes along. And to make it happen, we have this backend infrastructure, which is very simple, very intuitive. So it's lightweight in the sense that it just uses Angular and Django and SQLite. And it has different modes. For example, if Nullcon community wants to run its own instance, they can use it because it has Dockerized, so it's easy to deploy and run. And it has different modes with admin and users. So one can be admin, and everyone in the organization can be users, and eventually it gives it is possible to do nice things. And that is, again, it has this extendable APIs. So we have used standard REST APIs. So anything that is related to Bhadra can be seen as part of it. And in terms of tooling, we have, like, now that you have the knowledge base, it makes sense to kind of see what to do, how to make threat modeling a daily activity in telco premises. So the first tool what we built was Annotator, which is very similar to Attack Navigator. So basically the features are, you can create new attacks, you can edit existing ones, you can compare and kind of comments. So what I mean by this is, it is as simple as it looks, something very similar to this. This is the same framework which I showed. And here, a person who is modeling would understand and try to select different techniques. And imagine that if this is for each and every attack or threat, but imagine that for a specific customer, for a client, you have, let's say, modeled 50 different attacks, then you may want to also compare and see like what is the most used technique by the attacker, what is the most used category of tactic, and that kind of gives you a different insight. And that brings me to the second part of the tool, which is we call it as Bhadra, because everything what we see here can be treated as attack graphs, and we can do some nice analysis which is based on graph theory. So one of them is like on the connectivity, like to understand how important specific techniques are and how diverse an attacker's arsenal of tools are, by understanding the unique paths from one end to the other. And then there are subpaths, like how a subset of attacks are always seen in conjunction, and how that can lead us to take some decisions. And this is how it looks. So this is actually I think like around 60 attacks we modeled, and this is how the graph looks like. Here you see that there are certain thick edges, certain thin edges. So thick edges actually means that is the most prominent path the attacker has taken. For example, like if somebody has to deploy a defense, it should be towards deploying in a space where that tactic or that specific path would be completely eradicated, and that kind of reduces the risk of getting compromised. And having said this, based on what we have, based on what I presented, our future directions are multidimensional again. So one is uh, we want to include 5G vectors, and that means that 5G brings a whole new world of tools, whole new world of technologies, and that is something which is missing. And that is, while the operators are getting ready with a framework like Bhadra, we also prep them to get used to practices in the non-telco world, and we believe that would be our next step. And definitely build a family of similar frameworks, because although telco is standalone so far, with the integration of 5G, it's actually amalgamation of two worlds, and that brings different problems which can't be addressed as of now. But there are critical infrastructure, there are you might have heard of ORAN and things like this, and we want to build a family of protocols which helps to kind of support this. Again, I was talking about quantification. Our idea here is to propose a baseline for CVS scoring. Unfortunately, all these things might look very basic for people who are not from telco, but unfortunately they are the things missing in telco. And Bhadra's effort is actually to kind of streamline both telco and non-telco worlds. And you might be very familiar with MIS platform and also CV databases. Again, that is basic, but at the time missing, and mainly because all these operators in the circle of telecom operators have always remained in closed circles where they were not open to talk to each other. And the modern day security is actually about open intel and sharing what we know and learning from others' mistakes and things like this. And my humble effort from this kind of project is that we open up the security efforts within telco and prepare for the 5G, because it's going to bring a lot of people, the entire community which is used to this open source or open intelligence, and a lot of tools which telco is missing. And like I said, although it looks like just 52 attacks and 9 tactics, it has been going through 500 different types of attacks. That has given us, we want to leverage that to our advantage by actually building attack emulation. And basically what we want to do is we want to build this attack suites that we can use it to inject to different operators premises to understand how secure it is. And we have different ideas, mainly from research point of view, and also meanwhile Nokia, I'm part of Nokia Bell Labs, so Nokia is actually trying to come up with products that could be useful. And to summarize my talk, Bhadra is still it's in infancy, definitely needs community support. It could be any sort of feedback and critiques, research collaboration or contribution in terms of data samples, building tools, and any sort of things. I'm more than happy to get it. And yeah, that's my time, and thanks for listening.
Thank you, Sid, for this amazing, informative session. I am sure our participants must have found some important knowledge inputs from it. So, hello everyone. If anyone has any questions, you can drop them in the chat window, and I can read them out. Yeah, let's just. Okay, there's one couple of questions from Satyam Kumar. Great session, Siddharth. I have recently started researching and working on telco security and have multiple queries, although I would like to connect with you on LinkedIn later on more insights. So the first question is, does your Bhadra framework also cover the transmission network apart from radio and core network?
Yes, it does. It definitely does. But although I didn't want to although my ambition was to kind of explain how we would use it and show that what and all it covers, but Sachin probably would know that it's a entire new array of things, and definitely we can connect and discuss over it. But to answer precisely to your point, yes, it does cover.
The second question is, any tentative timeline by when could you come up with the updated Bhadra framework for 5G networks? Many operators in the market are already concerned about the increased attack surface in 5G networks. Now that the IP protocol stack and the IP-based attacks on NFV and SDN is going to be the part of standalone 5G core network.
Right. So timeline-wise, I I would say that we have already gathered all pieces that is required and also putting our best effort to kind of present it to different forums, including standardization bodies, and kind of try to bring everyone into our support, mainly because it's a humongous amount of work and certain things which mainly because like I've been telling that this telco world entirely has been working in a closed circles, and there are many aspects which is unknown, and that's one of the reason we, at least I personally think that the best way to do it is making it a collaborative effort. 5G wise, we have gathered, and it definitely, people who know how 5G network works is humongous. So we are actually expecting that although we can have the initial version by February, March, it would take a couple of more months to make it polished, because at least from our experience, we can quickly come up with, once we have gathered all the tags and everything, we can quickly come up with some structure, some knowledge of what it is, but again bringing them, categorizing them, cataloging them into structure, and debating on the words would take some time. So I would assume that by next year this time we are hopeful that we would have a polished version for sure. And yeah, let's see how it goes.
Okay, so last question from Satyam. Can you highlight some telco network security monitoring tools? As per my research, unlike the IP network, there are hardly any market tools which monitor telco specific protocols such as diameter, GTP, etc.
Sure. So probably we can connect. Like it's a very small community of telco security people who actually build this kind of tools. And one of my favorite tool has been something called a SIG plotter, which is actually takes into consideration of all the signaling protocols, and it does something. And it's a very valid point, because for people from non-telco, it kind of surprises me when I started working on it. Kind of surprises me that you can't use Nmap, because Nmap is the very basic tool which we all use. But unfortunately, you can't use the same thing on telco networks, because it works sometimes on an entirely different protocol that Nmap can't. And that's the kind of things, there is a lot of need, new need for tooling, and that is something which there are a small subset, but eventually it is going to increase, and let's see how it goes.
Okay, we have a couple of questions from Ovis. I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name. In a threat model, not everything is a vulnerability. How is this tied to CVSS?
Yeah, that's one of the reason why we want to be careful when we call it like a CVSS or some sort of scoring, but we want to call it an indicative thing. So there is definitely difference between threat, vulnerability, and attack. At this stage, what Bhadra can actually do is weigh each of them based on like the publicly known things, and based on whoever uses it, try to come up with a weightage saying that this was most evidently seen, this was most rarely seen, so this kind of thing. So we can give some sort of weighting to it, and the quantification is definitely tricky, and we wouldn't. That's why we don't want to tie it directly to CVSS, but we just want to give a baseline so that once we start seeing the vulnerabilities more and more, once we collect more information togetherly, and that's when we kind of can tie it to CVSS scoring.
Is there a way to automate mobile network threat models?
To some extent, yes. So what we are trying to do in Nokia, at least from the product, I'm not like the right person to talk about Nokia products, but from whatever knowledge I know, they do have some products which is analyzing specific operator premises and things like this. And what we are trying to do is use some based on certain threat model. In every threat model, what you assume is the adversary's capabilities, and based on that, it is possible to build some sort of attacks and try to see whether it can be a threat to that model. And there are instances where we have something called as NetGuard. Probably you can go to Nokia page and see the NetGuard product, and that's something attack emulation and also like defend it.
Okay. Would you be building a threat library and recommendations to fix the finding?
Yes, that's the plan. Recommendation is a very tricky aspect in this case, because like I said, what we're trying to build is an ocean of different technologies, and there are millions of things which has to be taken into consideration. And this is again irrespective of, although our approach is to make it like everything run by the community. I'm very much sure that once big players get involved, they want to sell their products and they want to sell their solutions. And this is an area where we just want to highlight or like kind of give an overview of what kind of recommendation would be nice. But eventually, it is going to be way more abstract, where people want to link their specific models.
Next.
And sure, yes, and CWSS model might be apt. I haven't tried it yet, or none of my team members have actually tried it.
Okay, I think those were all the questions we had.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Sid, once again, and thank you all for your participation in today's webinar session. We have our next webinar on red, purple, and blue team activity using Azure by Sumant Tiwari and Sakaldeep Yadav on 1st October. So hope to see you there. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys. Thanks a lot.